Hey, everybody, welcome to the Multipliers Leadership Podcast. We are so excited to be back with you. We are with our founder, Josh Foliart, and we are blessed with the current Secretary of Transformation and Shared Services, Joseph Wood. So, Joseph, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, good to be here and see you, Brother Elder and my Pastor Foliart. Good to be here with you guys.
We are so grateful to have you on this podcast, and you and I have known each other for, I think it's been over a decade now.
Yep, that's about right.
Maybe approaching 2 decades. We're getting old, but I'm grateful because we got to reconnect in a very real way in an executive cohort that we host through MULTIPLi that you were a part of, and that was such a blessing.
It really was
to have you in that group of 10 men weekly. Man, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us on this podcast. And I just want to kick this off by giving our listeners just a little bit of context and having you share some of your story. And when you and I were in a conversation prior, it kind of came through that, Moses is your guy because you resonate and identify with Moses. I would call you a modern day Moses.
And I see it.
Wow.
I'm going to affirm it out of the gate.
And so share with us this story, Chicago, cold night, and how that origin story of Joseph Wood shaped you into the man that you are currently. Sure. Just give our listeners a little bit of context before we get into details of what you do and how you do it.
So little less than 15 years ago, the laws in Illinois changed and said if you're ever adopted, and I was adopted, that you can have your original birth certificate. I'm thinking, wow, my whole life I wanted to know who my birth parents are. If I get my original birth certificate, I'll know who they are and I can search and let them know, hey, I'm here, I'm fine, thank you, gave me life. They sent it to me, but it was a foundling certificate. I never heard of the word foundling. I looked it up and it says that you were abandoned, you were found on this day. I said, well, that's the day I celebrate as my birthday. They said, no, that's just the day you were found. You were found on this day at this address by this man, Caesar Johnson, and taken in the orphanage by this doctor. And that just blew me away. I was just stunned. I'm 45, 46 years old, and you're telling me my whole life that that's not my birthday. I was fine. So I said, after 2 weeks of struggling with all this, I got to find this doctor who accepted me into the orphanage and see if he remembers anything more. Did the research. I found him. He had died in 1999. I wondered, can I find a guy who found me? Did all the research, and the very first number I called, it was Caesar Johnson. He was 80 years old, a Korean veteran, and he was blown away. He said, man, that had to be over 50 years ago. And I'm bawling at this point. No, it was only 45 years ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't look 50. Come on.
It was 45 years ago. But he tells a story. It was one of the coldest days in Chicago, snow and ice outside. He had just put his wife and kids to bed. He was a night supervisor at a Campbell's soup manufacturing plant, which I remember growing up. But anyway, he said he was put them to bed. He put his coat and scarf on, and he walked outside of his apartment complex, and there was a box with a blanket moving, and he didn't know what it was. He thought it was a pet or animal, and so he took his foot to move the blanket. The blanket moved, and he saw it was a kid in there. He was looking up and down the street, and he can't see really because it's nighttime. The snow and ice is blowing. So he picked the box up carefully and walked back into the apartment complex, woke his wife, woke his neighbors. They walked around the neighborhood trying to figure out where this kid came from. And a few hours later, they got the Chicago police to come by, and they were asking questions. They walked around the neighborhood and they said, hey, you saved this kid. We're going to take him to an orphanage downtown. And that's what they did. And that was the beginning of my story, my journey, my life.
Your birth, your found, that's so wild.
Yeah.
So wild. And so how has that story, and I know some of the backstory, but fast forward a little bit, how is that impacting your life currently and has shaped you up until this?
Oh man, it's a lot of struggle in that growing and teen years in particular, identification, who you are, puberty, regular stuff that every kid goes through. But to add on the fact that you were given up for adoption, so I thought, it was a struggle. And then I started wrestling with, well, was she a prostitute? Was she in an interracial relation that wasn't acceptable? Was she too young? Was she too old? Am I a product of incest or molestation or something? And I processed each one of those as a teen, which made that struggle more. The only piece that got me through was writing notes to the Lord, just helping me. Why me? This whole thing, and it gets to a point where I would say, I guess it didn't matter. She had me. It didn't matter. She had me, and so I went on, and that's the stuff that got me through my writing to the Lord and processing it that way until about a year ago, I ended up finding them. I found my birth family, and man, it has been the most unbelievable journey to have my kids unravel and see all this unfold before them, let alone before me. Has just been unreal. So on top of all the responsibilities and work that I have and raising girls and getting them married and now got grandkids and all, it's just been a unbelievable journey for me. And the Lord has just blessed from the very beginning.
And so it's a fresh blessing, a fresh thing in your life to have found your birth parents.
Well, now they both have passed, but
yes.
to come, but to know all, it's a huge family, unbelievable huge family, and to be at family reunions, and now starting to kind of get a sense of, okay, now I get a sense of where some of this comes from, or some of the medical pieces that whenever I went to the doctor growing up, I would just turn around, give them the papers back, because I don't have, normally that medical history. Tell us about your medical history from A through Z. I didn't have anything because I didn't have any tie in. Now I can get and pick up some of that and help my daughters and etc.
Okay, so let me dig just one layer deeper here. Yep. How do you reconcile these two stories, these two narratives that have played out, and over the past year, bringing them together in a very real way like never before? And how old are you today, Joseph?
58.
Oh, 58. Okay, 58. 58. You're having these discoveries and these, these moments. How are you reconciling these two worlds?
Well, when I got saved, that's when the Lord clearly helped me understand that I've been with you from the very beginning. You've been searching for your father, and I've been here. And so
that's gonna preach. Come on,
that it really did.
Don't get us excited over here, Joseph. You watch out now.
It helped me. It blessed me and it helped me. And so if I never found him, I knew I had him. And he ushered it. And so I always wanted to make sure I would be a good father, because I didn't know. Even though I had great people who had foster care and adopted me and this whole piece, but now he unveiled and said, I know what your heart has been desiring all these years, but in my time. Because I'm sitting here thinking, could I have received and accepted and been able to really process all of what I'm experiencing right now when I was 15, 16, and wanting to know. I wanted to know so bad. Oh, it's so much, even now, for me to grapple with, et cetera. And so I reconcile it with, because he's still there. He's just kind of, again, showing how he does it, how he blesses, how he said he was going to be there. And yes, there's questions I still have. Like, I want to talk to her. I want to talk to my dad, and they're not here. So again, in time, I'll have that, because I'll be with them in glory. But for right now, he has helped me navigate and get through this piece as well.
Wow. And so I know you talked about writing to the Lord earlier. Yes. I know you're a writer, and you're certainly what we would call a multiplier. You've taken your story and you're like, I want to be a man who is shaped into the image of Christ for the sake of others, right? Yeah, that's right. What your life's all about. And you've written some books, and they're children's books, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Joey's Journey. Come on.
That's exactly right. That's right.
And tell us about
Joy's Journey series was as my kids were finding out about this, as I was, Dad, you were only 5 pounds when you were found. And so I'm learning like they are. So they're being and then they were like, Dad, you got to write your story. You got to write. And I'm like, but how do I write my story? Because I don't know the beginning of it. I don't know how I got to the stairs of this man, this apartment complex. I met the man, and he tells how the story. But I don't know how I write this story if I don't know the beginning. And at 2 a.m. one night, I just woke up and I wrote 3 stories, and I wrote it for Joey. Joy is my second grandson. My oldest is Brian, his baby brother is Joy, and now we got little Anna, who's a couple of years old now. But I woke up at 2 a.m. I said, I got to write a story that Joy would understand, that this is where he comes from. This is our story. We're the only tree. We're the beginning, and he's some leaves on this tree. And
Wow.
I wrote 3 stories in one morning, and it was
Mm.
Leaving Joy, Saving Joy, and Adopting Joy. Leaving Joy was who I had in my head, who I thought was my mother. I thought she was a young teen who had a
Mm-hmm.
kid and walked down the street crying, tears freezing on her face, and pulled a basket out of her closet, wrapped them in blankets, and walked through the street and said, I got to get him to a place where he would be okay. And she
Yeah.
knew she couldn't take care of him, but she loved this kid. So she put him in front of this apartment complex, hid behind a tree, as she cried and waited for somebody to come out. That was
Mm.
Leaving Joy. Saving Joy is a story I just shared with your audience that
Yeah.
the guy's coming out and he saved this kid, Joy, as
Mm-hmm.
she turns and walks on the way. And then Adopting Joy tells a story of a couple of folks who could not have kids after 5 years of marriage and says, let's go to the orphanage to adopt a little girl,
Wow.
a foster little girl. They get there and she sees all these kids, wants all of them, says, no, I want to foster this little boy. When the authors, the publishers got them, they said 3 children's stories. The Leaving Joy, though, the one of leaving a kid, that is just too hard, we think, for little people to be reading, that somebody will leave a kid in the streets.
Mm.
And my Walmart
Mm.
retail side jumped in. I said, well, that means they got to buy the second book. And he and find out that he got saved.
You're sequencing it already. I like it.
And they said, yeah, no. So Saving Joy, when you read Saving Joy, it truly is the meshing of both Leaving Joy, because I put in there this young teen who's walking down the street and leaves this kid in the basket.
Mm-hmm.
In real life, it was a box, but for the children's book, I said it was a basket.
Yeah.
And then Adopting Joy is a story of, again, mother who's a teacher and dad construction worker. They couldn't have kids, so they thought after 5 years of marriage, my mother finally says, let's go to the orphanage and we can foster a little girl. And my dad was ecstatic because he hated coming home from work after building a large part of the city, because she put him back to work. She wanted to get pregnant and have a kid, and he was exhausted. And so they go there and she sees all these kids. And the rest of the story is they start foster caring me, and within a year she got pregnant. And then a year after that, she got pregnant again. And a year after that, so I have 3 siblings right up under me, boom, 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 because that's how the Lord does it. He said, I heard you. You said you want a house full of kids, but I got an assignment. I want you to go get this kid out of the orphanage first. And
Wow.
he gave her a house full.
Come on, man. What a story. And I know we're just skimming the surface of all the details, but thank you for sharing that. And we'll put a link in the show notes for you to go purchase the book, because you're going to want to get these books. There's 3 of them, right?
3 of them.
Well, it's only 2, because the publishers really wanted to mesh Leaving Joy and Saving Joy.
I was confused.
So it's Saving Joy,
all right. I'm learning
and Adopting Joy. And so, yes. And can I give this one? So I wrote that book probably 15 years, these books 15 years ago, when I found about Mr. Caesar.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, I told you I just found my birth family. Mm-hmm. And the detective who told me that they found them, here's how they knew they found them. I was found at 635 and 637 Marquette Road. My mom lived at 525 Marquette Road, 1 block away. It was almost like she literally probably walked down the street, knew the family, knew people were there, and left me there. Probably was hiding, probably knew. But I didn't know that. So I'm like, Lord, I wrote this book 15 years ago. I didn't know any of this. How did you know that? He said, because you were there. I was there. And it was just a providence revelation. How did I know that it was a young, and she was 21 when she had me. I was a baby of 4.
I love the thing I'm loving the most about this is that God is putting men like you in government in this season of history. I thank God for your story, because it resonates. And if God can do it with Joseph Wood, right? If he can pick you up,
that's right,
and turn you into a man that has such a I would just call it a divine destiny and purpose on your life, then he's willing to do it with anyone. So, man, I love that.
I agree. And Joseph, we'd love to hear kind of more of really even just the continuation of the journey. I know there's a lot of great impactful moments that happen in Chicago. But for your current role of the Secretary of Transformation and Shared Services, obviously you didn't end up there overnight. You've been in both the public and the private sector, very successful in a lot of those, obviously an author. The list really goes on for really your achievements. But I know it didn't just accidentally happen. You didn't get there quickly and overnight, like I said. So are there really just tell us what it took to get there. Tell us a little bit
The
more of what did it take to be where you're at right now,
Sure.
and maybe some principles to help kind of keep you grounded in that spot.
Well, the first one was Mama told me. That's how I got
Mama
into
told.
this. I
Okay.
got into
Okay.
leadership kind of by default. Again, I
Okay.
was the oldest, so when you're the oldest, you have a
Yep.
responsibility.
That's
You're
right.
supposed to
Yeah.
act like you got some sense because your brothers and sisters are watching you, and
Yep.
so
Yep.
you
Yep.
it's kind of built in when you're the oldest. That
Yep.
was number one. Number two, at about 10, when I was adopted, mom and dad was going through a divorce. Mom said I had to pick up another job. You have a responsibility to take care of your brothers and sisters. What I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to tell my mother is these are not my kids, they're your kids. But I didn't do that
But you
because
did it because you're a wise man. Even at 10, you're
absolutely.
being wise. There it is.
Oh yeah. But so I say, okay, so you said you just keep an eye on response. Well, a couple of years in, she said, um, uh, I'm sitting here, what will I do? And I started a young teens group, a teenage group in my community in Chicago in Jeffrey Manor, which is route with drugs and gangs. And it had grew so fast, this teen club. It was called TNT, Teens
Teen.
Together.
Mm-hmm.
TNT, Teens Together. The church gave me keys to the fellowship hall. Anytime you need to bring everybody together, you can be at this
Let's
fellowship
go.
hall. And it just grew because parents were looking for a safe place for their kids
Right.
and an option, an outlet. Well, my mother also told me you will do this the rest of your life. You need to be engaged where you live. Now, again, I was doing it
Mm.
because she told me. Well, I went on to college. I came back home and I started looking at some of the same places I lived. Like, why is it still broken? Why this? And I just jumped in. I became a local school council board member. I jumped in and uh, other nonprofits helping in the community, and this
Mm-hmm.
just became part of the fabric. After work, jumped right back in and did those type of work, Citizens Against Taxes, and all this type of thing. Came to Arkansas, and I just kept doing it because this is where I lived. And uh,
Yeah.
eventually, a guy ran for Secretary of State. Said, "Hey, would you be my deputy secretary?" And I'm like, hold on, you guys will pay me to do this? My mother never told me you get paid to do this stuff. And,
Everybody that's listening that said to work for a nonprofit, not get paid, is like,
oh
yeah, you come
yeah.
on.
And so
Uh,
and so he said, yeah, you'll get paid. And so he won, and we got sworn in. And 2 weeks later, I got my paycheck, and I said, so we really don't get paid, do we? He started laughing.
Yeah. There
But
you go.
anyway, that just started that work, and I had spent some years at Walmart and Home Depot doing executive development and leadership and HR with them, and a Secretary of State's office. Then I got asked to run for county judge and bring some of that stuff I was doing in Secretary's office,
Mm-hmm.
transforming elections and businesses, and bring that to the county. And so we had a very robust election. Won first Black judge in Arkansas, county judge in Arkansas's history,
Wow.
first Republican judge in 40 years in Washington County. But we were able to go in and bring a lot of people together, Democrats and Republicans, to say, yes, how do we do better with the money that we've been entrusted with? How do we do better with our infrastructure? And so we did a lot there. Well, I ran for lieutenant governor about a year ago. I lost, but I was running and the governor was running. And after she saw me losing, she said, no, you're going to be on my cabinet. She asked me to be a part of her cabinet and to do what I did at the Secretary of State's office in the
Mm-hmm.
county to help transform government. So come on, this is what and I'm sitting here transform. But she said, this is your life. This is what you've been doing. This is your process. Whether you call it that or not, this is what you've done. You're able to
Mm-hmm.
bring folks together
hmm
and see where the vision and the mission is and help drive them toward that. And that's what I need you to do here. And so that's
Wow.
that role that I have. I get a chance to work with the governor and her other 14 cabinet members. I'm one of the cabinet, and really
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, you have corrections or you have education, but how can we figure out how to buy better in the state as opposed to everybody buying their own? Or how can we
Yeah.
do,
Work together.
public safety and do it better and reduce the footprint, be more efficient, cut out waste, et cetera. So that's the role that I have.
So
And you were, well,
I was just going to ask on you mentioned being the first Black judge, the first Black Republican
yep.
in Washington County. Talk about the obstacles that you've had along the way, whether it be
Yes.
race or Republican, or just give us a little snapshot
Sure.
of what you've had to overcome in your journey to get to
Well,
kind of where you are right
yeah.
now. And we've heard your story. You've already overcome a lot.
And
But then you arrive on the public scene, and I'm sure there were some obstacles.
oh yeah, it's a
Yeah.
little different on the public because in the private you have shareholders and you have a responsibility. You got to show value, etc.
Yeah.
In the public sector, I brought that same mentality. Just because we've always done it, that doesn't get us the efficiency, the real stewardship of what's been entrusted to us. We got to give it back better, and so I'm bringing that in. And so it was a stretch because I'm challenging the status quo. I'm asking questions that you don't ask that question, or no, it's good enough for government work. No, that's not good enough for me though, because again, I am a taxpayer as well before I got in the public, and I wanted if my dollars being spent well type of thing. I think the challenges though are a number of things. And have I been out in some of the county areas and been accosted by folks who said something like, "Hey, I'm a racist. You need to not talk to me." I have. But at the end, it just caused me to dig in even more that we're better than that. And the rest of the county, this may be one individual. I'm not going to paint the whole entire folks who look different than me that way, because I wouldn't be in that position if it was that way.
That's right.
And so anyway, again, the vision crosses across everybody. We want a better county, and we get a better county by having exemplary leaders providing exemplary services. And that's what drew people. And then they voted for me a second time. So again, the challenges are always going to be there. And if it wasn't race, it would be because you're in the opposite party. It's going to be you're not in the right party. But at the end, when I'm building a road, it doesn't say Republican or Democrat. It says build a road. We got to get an ambulance across. We got to get a school bus across. I'm pretty conservative. I stand on faith, freedoms, and family. That's kind of my mantra, and has been my whole life, because faith is what got me through. It's been about family who accepted me and brought me in, twice adopted into Christ's family, and then adopted. And the freedoms mean, for me, it is, how do I help you as a family? How do I help you as a business to do what you need to do without me as government or public interfering? So being engaged community, people are going to be a lot more responsible to community than they will government. You know who's in your community, who's shepherding that food pantry, and not this faceless group, say, in DC. So,
and vision unites, right?
I think it does. Absolutely.
Vision
That's what
unites.
the word talks about. Oh, yeah.
Vision unites. And without vision,
people perish.
Exactly right.
So thank you for bringing vision and plowing forward in the face of adversity, obstacle. And there's always the crazies out there. You know,
you guys will appreciate this. You appreciate this piece. So walking through that journey in Chicago is one thing. Coming to Arkansas, I just love this fact that we used to be the Diamond State, and we still are the Diamond State. Only a handful of public entities where you can come and dig for your own diamonds here in Arkansas. But you just don't go there and pick up diamonds. You got to dig for it. There's a process, and therein lies the challenges, the adversity, the transformation. That's us as people, but that's us as a state. How do we work through all that? Because we can come shining through. I think the Lord knows that. That's why we have to stay on this journey and keep pressing, because we'll learn more about who we are through him, and he'll reveal, hey, I got a plan for you and purpose for you. But you can't know it unless you stay on that journey. Deal with the adversity, come up with the pressure, and that time and pressure yields the diamond.
I think that's some really good insight for all of us. And to be able to see your journey, Joseph, I keep being encouraged with just the resilience that you have to continue to push forward, and really to see what needs to be done, how to bring people together around whatever that is, in the community, private or public sector. But for you, I know you have to continue to grow your own self in that. And you've stepped into several roles that you've never done before, and said, hey, I'm going to step right in and fill this gap. What helps you continue to develop your own self, your own leadership development? Obviously, you're pouring out a lot to others, but at the same time, maybe you come up and you're like, man, I don't know if I have the right thing to pour out. So how do you grow in that area, being this far in your career?
Sure. I reference a lot when I go out and speak to groups and all about the Wizard of Oz, the wonderful Wizard of Oz, that story, because it was a story that I loved as a kid growing up, and would always want to read it or watch it on TV. And then the movies came, and then it was The Wiz with the Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, because to me, it really did illustrate going through adversity and challenges, but at the end of it, they're still pressing through their journey, and that's staying on it. So for me, it is to constantly be on this journey. my mother was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher. I taught for a while. So I'm a lifelong learner. I
Mm-hmm.
know that the only way I can continue to try to be responsible and try to shepherd and lead folks is to make sure that I'm sharpening my iron. And so when Pastor Foliart hit me up, I think in November, December, say, hey, we're going to put a cohort together and all. I'm like, yep, I'm in. And this is before I knew I was going to be moving down into the central Arkansas and doing stuff with the governor. And so, hey, we're going to do it online. You could do it down there. So, but that's just me. I'm in a group now, Kairos now, and I'm in maybe week 3. So I'm always wanting to continue to learn and be better, get closer with Christ. So again, it helps me when I'm going out there to face the giants and deal with whatever obstacles are out there and pour out to others.
I think that's some great insight for all of us as to how to continue to grow and develop yourself, because it could be really easy at this point in your career, at least from my perspective, to just coast and be like, we're good. It's government work, as you said earlier. But that's not the way that you think. And that's one of the reasons that I really, really appreciate you and what you've done for the state of Arkansas. I'm really grateful.
So if we were to take a snapshot back over your career, okay, and also just into your future, what does Joseph Wood want to be known for? What legacy would you like to? What mark would you like to leave through? I know it's a big question.
Yeah, that word legacy is it's for public service. I really would like to be seen or known as a not just a servant leader, but a statesman. When people talk about, and I think in our cohort, I talked about Frederick Douglass being this mentor, a dead poet, if you will, of mine. I never met and all, but somebody like a Frederick Douglass or a Abraham Lincoln, I don't think people call them politicians. I really do think that they're considered statesmen, people who fought the good fight against even odds or people inside of their own circles to say, no, for the greater good of this country, this is how we need to operate and do. And for the President Lincoln to say, Douglas, I need to have your voice into where I'm trying to head and to receive that's powerful. So from the freedom side or the public service side, I want to be known as a statesman, a builder, if you will, of people, community, country, if you will. For family, I want, if anything, that Daddy loved us and we knew it without a shadow of a doubt. He told us, he showed us, he exemplified it. He was an example for it. He and through that, it's the family piece, because we watched him for his whole life. Before we got here, he's been searching for this family piece, and now we found the family piece. He's tied us all into that. My daughter just briefly had my oldest has felt some lumps and felt breast cancer, and she got a little nervous about it, started going through it, and then I didn't hear from her. She had a day before the final results of the testing, and she hadn't called, and I'm asking my wife, have you heard? Nothing. And that's not like her. I'm pretty tight with all my girls. My son-in-law is calling and saying, hey, she's just pretty quiet, and but she's always on the phone. When the results come in, the day ends, she calls, hey, Dad. I'm like, where have you been? You haven't talked. She said, well, I got through it all. I said, how? She said, Auntie Diane. Auntie Diane is my biological sister that we just connected in the past year. My mother died of breast cancer at 36 years old, my biological mother. And so for me, when I found that she passed, number one, at 36, but of breast cancer, I got 3 daughters. I become heightened aware. Now my daughter has a lumps and all she's nervous about. She's talking to her auntie that she just within the past year, and her auntie is what helped her get through it. So it was worth all the struggles of my journey just for them to have that. Because if I'm not here, she's got family who's got history who can help work her through whatever that is. I'm getting choked. But that's the power for that. That's so anyway, to be the legacy, if you will, is that he was about family. He was about his faith, which has navigated him from the very beginning before he even knew he had faith, because God had his hand on me in the very beginning in that box, his family, and then the freedoms, which being this statesman and trying to be a good example.
I love the distinguishment between a politician and a statesman.
Oh yeah.
Man,
Oh.
I really, really like that, and I've never heard that, and that's so right on, and that's really
I don't
who
want to be
you are.
known. I really don't want to be known as a politician. I
Yeah,
can't stand them because they drive me
yeah.
insane.
Well,
I don't know
it's
how anybody could look at you and not think that you're that of a
yeah,
statesman, Joseph.
Wow.
definitely a
Like
statement.
there's no doubt about that already about you. It's already
Wow.
true of you.
Thank you. That's tough. Well, those are
Well,
the three.
No, that's good.
If we can leave that. Yep.
We're sitting here just processing all that you just said
Whew.
and
yeah,
thinking, man, that we want the same thing, right? We want
Sure.
it's
to
true.
fight for a cause that
Yep.
matters,
That's right.
Yeah.
to be men of honor, integrity,
Yes.
Mhm.
fighting for our families,
That's right.
And to bring them into the
creating
story too
Mm.
is
and bring
Mm.
them into the story. I love the way you framed your story, and even the way that God sequenced your story, where your daughters got to watch you
Oh,
in the process of learning all of this.
that's right.
You can't script that
No.
story.
No.
yeah.
You couldn't have written that story, and I'm sure there was a lot of pain and hurt and
Oh,
confusion.
sure.
You know, John Eldredge talks a lot about, most men are like people who have arrived 45 minutes late to a
It's a
movie.
movie.
They know something important is happening,
Not
but
sure
they
what.
don't know exactly what, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, something's going on here. I don't know the plot. And that's kind of how you lived your
Wow.
life
That's right.
for so long.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden, God brought some answers to
Woo.
you, to
That's
your
right.
family.
Right.
And, I just can't get
Yeah.
the phrase out of my head for such a time as
Is
this.
this? That's right.
Yeah.
That's the 414. That's been one of those. Oh, and again, and she was adopted, and
Yeah.
again, the furthest thing from her mind was being a queen, let alone leading
Mhm.
her people, because they were supposed to be eradicated, and
Yes.
her uncle's like, well, hey, you one of them too. Do you think you're going to be
Yeah.
saved by all this?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You couldn't have told me, let alone that I would be a judge or be on the
Mhm.
governor's cabinet. I wanted that for me to do what we did in Chicago and work with those teenagers, and really kind of save them, because we really did coalesce
Mhm.
and bring folks together. That was a lot, but for the Lord to say, I got more, and I didn't know,
Mm.
just stay on your journey, just keep pressing. Again, I've been blessed. He can take me off this earth right now. My wife hates me saying that, but he can take me
Yeah.
off right now, and
We
I've
don't
had a
like
blessed
it either.
life.
Yeah, we don't like it either. We want to stay on your wife's good side, just so you know.
Yeah, exactly right.
Uh,
I couldn't imagine having, 3 daughters and 2 son-in-laws and 3 grandkids, and they all have just thrived and doing well. But again, they've watched all this with me. We've gone through it together, if you will. And
Mhm.
normally when we talk about stories to our kids, they just have to go on the journey. Pastor, when you talk about, hey, when you were a kid, they're just kind of walking down the journey with you, and they may ask granddad or grandma, is that true?
Yeah.
Did daddy do? For
Yeah.
me, it was all being revealed at the same time. Hey,
Yeah.
here's some
Wow.
notes. And so
well, that's something I wanted to ask about is just that you've talked a few times about bringing the family into the journey, and
oh
so
yeah.
how do you do that as a husband, as a father, and say, hey, let me into even just the parts that are even some of the vulnerable parts and some of
Oh
the
yeah.
insecurity
Yep.
and wrestle, like
Wow.
obviously there's a different approaches in parenting and all those things, but I'd
That's
love
right.
just to
That's
hear
right.
your own processing and how
Mm.
you've done that or balanced that, because I don't think you're the only one that's been in that seat before, and I would love to hear
Yeah.
just your approach.
So I would say it's two. I had 2 points. My mother, who adopted me, I always wanted to know about my birth family, and so when they adopted me at 10 years old, 11 years old, I said, "Well, can we tell my birth family that I'm okay and all that?" She said, well, in time, well, 11 years old, I'm asking again. She said, well, why don't you wait till you're 18? We can search for them and all this. You'll be of age where you can go, like
Mhm.
military, you can be gone. We can search it. Well, at 18, she just went into a meltdown. It was so hard for her to was I not a good mother? Are you gonna leave
Mhm.
me? And I didn't understand any of that. No, I don't want another woman telling me what to do. I just
Yes.
I'm good with that piece. I'm ready to go to college and do my thing, and but I didn't understand that. But when I got married and had kids, then it made sense. All she was doing is being a parent, protecting her kid
Mm-hmm.
from the unknown. She didn't know what I would find. She didn't know who, because she didn't have any information either. But
Yeah,
I
right.
didn't understand that because I wasn't a parent. I was a young 18-year-old who wanted what I wanted, just like most 17, 18-year-olds, right? That's
Yeah.
just what.
Yeah.
Well, now fast forward to when my daughter turned 13, 14, she was pushing and asking questions. I'm like, but you're not old enough to understand all that. Stop
Mm-hmm.
talking to me, Dad, like I'm a baby. I'm not a baby. You can tell.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it hit me. I got to be a little bit more open and transparent. And then, so what happens when you do that? It's no longer you're sitting on the pedestal now. Dad
Mm.
does have some vulnerabilities. Dad does make
He's
mistakes.
human.
Mama's
Yeah, he is
often
human.
calls him out on those mistakes. I mean, that's just how those things
As
work.
it should.
But
Yeah.
I think therein lies where it started with me to be more open about this journey piece. I love the folks who adopted me, and here's the piece. I think may have shared this with on the cohort group. I was always in love with my people who adopted me, who fostered and then adopted me. I've always
Mm-hmm.
because they gave me a life.
Yes.
Yes.
But I have to give deference to obviously the Lord, who said, I've given you a mom and a dad who gave you life.
Mm-hmm.
So the people who gave me life, my biological mother and father, I've always loved them. Regardless, I didn't know any of this until last year. But even if she was a prostitute, or even if she was in an interracial, even if I'm a product and say, she gave me life. Mr. Caesar, the guy who found me, said, you keep talking
Mm-hmm.
about that. She must have loved you because she put you in a place where you can be found. She could have
Mm.
left you in a plastic bag and left you in the alley, and I wouldn't have known, found you.
Mm-hmm.
So I told my dad this past Father's Day, the one who adopted me, it had to happen the way that it did. But because of that, you and Mom were able to go into this orphanage and give me a life. But now I'm making some inroads to the people who gave me life. And there's two different, but it's still a love. And that's Lord.
Yeah.
He's created all of it, and he'll deal with and work with all of that. But that's and so that piece right there, I think it helped my kids understand this is, man, Dad is kind of and my son-in-laws have said, yep, this is what you guys have married into. But I think again, the complexity and the richness of it, and for them to also maybe be that same way watching their father-in-law,
Yeah.
who's being just as vulnerable, and they've gone to the reunions as well, and so they're seeing this unfold before
Right
them,
in front of them.
so they can hopefully pick that up to be great dads and be vulnerable as well. That we don't walk on water, and oftentimes
right.
our kids think we do.
Yep.
Until Mom calls us out and say no, they don't. Right?
Yeah.
That make any sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you this, Joseph, and
Sure.
we'll try to bring this to conclusion. I feel like we could continue talking for forever.
A while. Yeah.
You're a leader. You're a statesman, and a man of God. For such a time as this, you've been purposed and destined. There's a lot of men out there who are in a similar position, probably not in government. Maybe they are, but in business or education. Talk to us about what advice would you give leaders like yourself, whether they're the same age as you or whether they're younger, maybe they're older. Just what advice would you give that are, trying to live a life on purpose, trying to fulfill all that God called them
That's good. Yeah.
to do?
I think I'm gonna go back to the Wizard of Oz. You got to stay on this journey, and on this journey, you got to be true to you. You got to be true to say, have I learned everything that I can learn? Do I have some folks that I can go and sharpen? Iron sharpens iron. So again, the last thing I need to do is add another thing to my plate, especially after I committed and said, yes, I'll join the cohort. Then next thing I know, I'm being asked to go to Central Arkansas. I'm like, but I need this to grow me and make sure that I'm gonna be ready for this new venture that I'm about to take in. So if you're running a church, I call it the fellowship fueling up. Why do believers go to church? Really, it's to go and get fueled up. So because Monday happens, and we need to be making sure we're walking our talk. The talk happens on Sunday, and we're getting the word, but are we living that word? And that's being executed on Monday. So for those who are in business or in church or in nonprofits and all, how do you get fortified? And the only way I think you get fortified is staying in the Word. And I do it daily, every day. For 4 years, every day, Sundays, Saturday, with a friend of mine in Louisiana. It's just to go through that. That's to kick off the day. So I got a little insulation from the world of crazy that's out there and all. But so that would be the encouragement to, one, continue to sharpen yourself with others. That's the first part. And then the second is to, again, give it away. Because I believe in the boomerang effect and or the laws of reciprocity, or and a good word they talk about. I'm gonna give it back to you, measured and shaken and
running over.
But you gotta give it out. And so the boomerang is, you just do what you're supposed to do. Do what's right. Give it away, and it'll come back to you. You don't know how, you don't know when. You just got to know it's going to come back.
The Lord's going to take care of it.
He is. He does.
That's a good word, Joseph. And really, at the beginning, the way that we even opened up, and Josh a moment ago just said that you're like that of a modern day Moses. And whether you want to grab a hold of that or not, one thing that I see true in your story, and this is just something that's encouraging me as I've listened and followed you for a while, is you have just such a story of the gospel that's just laid over your life in such a significant and powerful way, both from being adopted twice to even just the way that you're bringing families from different backgrounds together for a common purpose, a common good, a common vision.
Sure.
And for you to be able to do that both in the political spectrum, or that field, or public and private sectors, both, and your family as well, and bringing those people into the story is just such a view of the gospel. And so for that, for me personally, I just want to say thank you for sharing those pieces of your story. But I know that many others are blessed because of the story that the Lord continues to write, but also how you're living it out as well. And so I just want to say thank you as we start to wrap up. Josh, any last thoughts before we officially close?
My thought is, thank you for being a multiplier, and we want to do anything we can to get in alignment with what you're doing and what God's doing through you. And so we'll say this publicly, however we can help. It's not a Republican Democrat thing.
That's right.
It's a mankind thing.
Come on.
And it's a calling. It's so much bigger than what people see. And I see you in that space. I see you living out a calling, not a job.
That's right.
Just taking the next right step. So
thanks for sharing your
the Kingdom
Party.
What's that?
He said you got the Democrat Party, you got the Republican Party. He said, but I'm all about the Kingdom Party. I said, go ahead, Pastor.
I'm in on that. I'm in on that one.
I'm all about the Kingdom Party.
All right. Well, multipliers, thank you again for joining the podcast here with Secretary Wood. And we're just so grateful for the time we had together. Make sure you guys are subscribing and sharing these so we can look out for what's coming next. And once again, we'll talk to you guys soon. God bless.
Blessings.